I'm not strong enough yet, guy. Hold me up. I'm just gonna shoot over you. And then I didn't shoot well my first 2 months, 3 months, maybe my first 6 months of the season. I think I started to figure out the pace of the game, understanding the pick and roll. I was getting more pin downs.
Kevin Durant did not walk back those Michael Jordan comments, and that is why this story exploded all over again. A lot of people thought time would cool everything down. They thought the heat from that podcast would fade, the old players would stop talking, and KD would eventually smooth it over with one safe answer. That did not happen. Instead, months later, Durant sat down again, looked the whole basketball world in the face, and stood by what he said. No apology, no panic, no retreat. And that is the moment people started asking a much bigger question. Was that old podcast moment really just a random comment, or was there something more behind it? Because when KD first said it, he said it on LeBron James' platform, with LeBron right there laughing. Then, months later, when he had a perfect chance to calm things down, he doubled down instead. That is what made people think this was not just one loose line. That is what made the private call rumor take off. The heart of this whole story is simple. Kevin Durant said something about Michael Jordan that many fans felt crossed a line, and he said it in the one place that made it feel even bigger. He said it while sitting next to LeBron James and Steve Nash. That matters because LeBron and Jordan are always tied together in the same debate. Every word around one man gets measured against the other. So when KD made that baseball comment and LeBron laughed instead of stopping it, a lot of people instantly felt there was a message in the room. They felt like this was not only about Jordan's past, they felt like it was also about LeBron's image. It felt like Jordan's story was being cut down a little so LeBron's long run could look even greater. And once people started hearing it that way, everything after that became more charged. To really understand why the reaction was so strong, you have to go back to that podcast. Kevin Durant was talking about commitment. He was talking about how hard it is to stay locked in for years and years at the top. He was describing the mental burden of being great for a long time. He said every great player reaches that point where he has to ask himself if he still wants to do this. That part made sense. That part was honest. Anybody who has followed KD's career knows he thinks deeply about the game. He was building up to a point about the pressure of staying in the fight for so many years. Then he said it. He brought up the idea that some people say they want to go play baseball and then come back. LeBron laughed and answered by saying some people go 22 straight. Nobody said Jordan's name, but everybody knew who they meant. That is where the fire started. Because the baseball line is not just some fun piece of Jordan history, it is tied to one of the darkest times in his life. Michael Jordan stepped away from basketball after the murder of his father. He went to baseball because that was part of a dream he shared with his dad. That is why so many people got upset. They felt KD and LeBron were reducing something painful and personal into a joke about commitment. They felt like Jordan's grief was being turned into a line that made LeBron look tougher for never stepping away. That is why the clip spread so fast. It was not only because of the GOAT debate, it was because many fans felt a line had been crossed. They did not hear a smart point about history. They heard two modern stars laughing around one of the deepest wounds in Jordan's story. And what made it worse for many people was the setting. This did not happen in some cold interview room with a serious journalist pressing KD about history. It happened on LeBron's show. It happened in a relaxed setting where the vibe was friendly, where people were laughing, and where LeBron was right there in the middle of it. That gave the moment a completely different feeling. If Durant had said the same thing alone in a long one-on-one interview, some fans still would have hated it, but the meaning would have been different. On LeBron's platform, with LeBron laughing, it looked like something else. It looked like a shared message. It looked like Jordan was being used as a comparison point, so LeBron's own path could be praised. That is why people began talking about coordination. That is why the rumor of some private talk behind the scenes started to sound believable to a lot of fans, even if they had no hard proof in front of them. The reason that rumor stuck is because KD did not act like a man who slipped. He acted like a man who meant every word. When the backlash came, he did not rush in with a long apology. He did not say the clip was misunderstood. He did not say he forgot the painful context. He went to social media and said it was okay to call out the fact that Jordan retired. He said Jordan retired 3 times and was still the GOAT. He even joked that he would say it every day for the rest of his life if he wanted to. That attitude told people something important. It told them Durant did not see himself as wrong. He did not think he had crossed some line that required a cleanup job. He felt like he was simply saying something factual, and he was not going to bend just because fans got emotional about it. That is where the story gets more complicated than people want to admit. Kevin Durant has not spent years trying to tear down Michael Jordan. In fact, he has praised Jordan many times. He has called Jordan the greatest before. He has called him the standard and the blueprint. He has talked about Jordan with deep respect. So this is not a case of a man who suddenly hates MJ and wants LeBron above him at all costs. That is why the whole thing feels so strange. KD's history says he respects Jordan. His own words say Jordan is still the standard. But that one comment on that one podcast sounded very different because of the timing, the tone, the laugh, and the company. That is why fans kept arguing over what it really meant. Was it disrespect? Was it just a fact? Was it both at the same time? That is why the debate never fully died. Then the former players jumped in, and once they did, the whole thing became even louder. These were not random fans online. These were men who played in Jordan's era, men who understood exactly what those years felt like, men who lived through the fear, the pressure, the headlines, and the weight Jordan carried. When they heard KD and LeBron laughing over that baseball comment, many of them took it personally. They did not see nuance. They did not hear context. They heard disrespect. They heard modern stars acting too comfortable with history they did not live. And when people who were there start speaking with that kind of emotion, the whole story takes on a different kind of force. Stacey King came hard because for him, this was not a debate topic. This was personal memory. He played with Jordan. He saw those years. He saw what Jordan was before the retirement, what he was after, and what he went through as a man. So when King reacted, it was not only about one comment. It was about the feeling that LeBron and KD were trying to reshape history through a podcast. King's point was simple and sharp. Truly great players do not need to sit around telling people they are great. The game tells the story. The championships tell the story. The fear opponents felt tells the story. In his eyes, the whole moment felt like insecurity. It felt like 2 all-time great players still needing to talk around Jordan because Jordan's shadow remains too big to ignore. Kwame Brown took the loud road, but the main point under all that noise was very clear. He said there was no excuse for either LeBron or KD to act like they did not know why Jordan left the game. These are not clueless players. These are men who study basketball history. These are men who understand the sport at a deep level. So when they joked around that baseball line, Kwame felt it had to be a choice, not an accident. That is why so many older voices kept returning to the same word, choice. They believed KD chose that line. They believed LeBron chose to laugh. They believed nobody in that room wanted to add the missing pain because the point worked better without it. Charles Barkley came at it from a different angle, but his blade was just as sharp. Barkley was less interested in the emotional side and more interested in what this whole thing said about Durant and modern star culture. He has always been tough on super teams. He has always been willing to say a star's legacy gets messy when he joins forces in a way that makes the path easier.
So for Barkley, KD trying to talk around Jordan while still carrying his own complicated legacy was a bad look. He saw a man whose own place in history is still debated sitting on another man's platform and taking a shot at Jordan's story. That does not make KD a villain, but it does make the whole thing feel less noble than his defenders want it to feel. Magic Johnson saw something even bigger in it. To Magic, this was not just about one comment or even one debate. This was about a whole era of basketball. He has said many times that the modern game feels too friendly, too smooth, too soft around the edges. In his day, players did not sit around building brands together and laughing through greatness talk. They hated each other on the court. They wanted to destroy each other. That hatred gave the game sharpness. It gave rivalries real life. So when Magic looked at KD and LeBron laughing together about Jordan, he did not just see a bad joke. He saw the perfect symbol of what he believes is wrong with modern basketball. Too much comfort, too much friendship, too much image control, not enough edge. Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce added another layer to the criticism by going after the bigger message about commitment. They heard KD talking about long-term dedication and could not help thinking about load management, missed games, and the softer rhythm of the modern league. Their point was that you cannot talk too proudly about endurance and commitment while also playing in an era where stars rest more, play fewer full seasons, and often treat the regular season like something to be managed instead of fully attacked. That argument hit hard because it connected the baseball comment to a bigger frustration many older players have. They believe the stars of today want credit for longevity without living through the same kind of wear, same kind of demand, and same kind of season-to-season grind that older generations faced. That is why the story lasted. It was never just about 8 seconds of audio. It became a fight over history, pain, loyalty, respect, and who gets to shape the story of greatness. For Jordan loyalists, the clip sounded like a cheap shot. For LeBron supporters, it sounded like a fair point about longevity. For KD fans, it sounded like a blunt truth stated without fear. And for the old legends, it became one more sign that the modern stars are too comfortable touching history without carrying its full weight. That is what made the whole thing keep burning even months later. Then March 17, 2026 arrived, and instead of calming things down, Kevin Durant made the whole story live again. He sat down with Michael Lee for The Ringer at a moment when everyone was already watching him for another reason. Durant was closing in on Michael Jordan's career point total. That is a huge milestone, one of the kind that changes how a player is remembered forever. Most people expected KD to handle the Jordan question gently at that point. They thought he would praise Jordan, maybe soften the old podcast moment, and move on. But again, that did not happen. Durant stayed firm. He called Jordan the standard. He called him the blueprint. And then he stood by the central point that caused all the trouble in the first place. This is where the story gets even more interesting, because KD's defense of himself was not really an attack on Jordan in the way many people first heard it. Durant's point in that Ringer interview was that passing Jordan on the all-time scoring list does not mean he was greater. In fact, he was trying to say the opposite. He was saying Jordan would be much higher if he had simply never stepped away. He was saying Jordan left years of points on the table. He was saying the scoring list needs context. That is actually a respectful point when you think about it carefully. Durant was almost trying to protect Jordan's standing, not tear it down. He did not want people to look at the list and think passing MJ meant he had become something Jordan was not. He wanted people to know Jordan's total came with time removed. And that is why the whole thing remains such a mess, because the deeper KD explanation is more fair than the original clip sounded.
In the interview, he was not mocking Jordan. He was saying Jordan could have had far more points if life had gone differently. He was saying Jordan was more than a number. He was saying context matters. That sounds respectful. That sounds like basketball history spoken by someone who actually cares about accuracy. But the reason it still upsets so many people is because the original podcast setting made it feel dirty. The laugh did damage that the later explanation could not fully erase. Once fans felt a line had been crossed, the cleaner explanation came too late. This is also why the idea of a leaked private call between LeBron and KD had so much power. Whether anyone ever proved such a call in full or not, people felt like the pattern said enough. First, KD says the baseball line on LeBron's podcast, LeBron laughs, the clip goes viral. Old legends go crazy. Then, months later, at the exact moment KD is about to pass Jordan in points, he doubles down instead of backing away. For many fans, that did not feel random. It felt like a continuing effort to weaken one part of Jordan's story while raising one part of LeBron's. And once people start believing there is strategy behind public words, every smile, every laugh, and every later interview starts looking planned. Now, maybe some of that is too dramatic. Maybe there was no grand plan. Maybe there was no secret push. Maybe Kevin Durant simply speaks his mind, and LeBron simply liked the comparison in that moment. That is possible. In fact, it may even be the simplest truth. But sports fans do not live on simple truth. They live on patterns, rivalries, timing, and what feels believable. And what felt believable to a lot of people was that this was bigger than one careless line. It felt like one superstar helping another superstar in the one debate that never ends. Jordan against LeBron. Legacy against legacy. Era against era. LeBron's role in all this is a huge part of why the story will not die. If Durant had said everything alone, the reaction still would have been strong, but it would not have hit the same way. LeBron's laugh made it heavier. LeBron being the host made it heavier. LeBron not stepping in with any context made it heavier. Because in that moment, it looked like he was happy to let Jordan's pain be turned into a point that made his own long run look stronger. That may not have been his goal, but that is how it looked. And perception matters. In the GOAT debate, perception often matters as much as fact. That is why many Jordan fans believe the laugh said more than any sentence. They heard it as approval. They heard it as satisfaction. They heard it as LeBron enjoying a comparison that made him look like the one who never stepped away while Jordan did. Again, context makes that reading painful, because Jordan did not step away out of comfort or boredom. He stepped away after deep personal loss. That is the wound under all of this. That is why the clip still bothers people. It did not just compare careers, it touched grief. And once grief enters a sports debate, people stop treating it like a normal take. At the same time, Kevin Durant's later words also show why some people defend him. He did not say Jordan was not the GOAT. He did not say LeBron was better. He did not say passing Jordan in points meant more than Jordan's career. He said the opposite. He said Jordan is the standard. He said Jordan is the blueprint. He said Jordan could have had much more if he had kept playing. That is not hatred. That is not disrespect in the cleanest reading. That is a player trying to put scoring history into context. But sports is not only about clean readings. It is also about tone, timing, and emotion. And KD lost control of all three the moment that original podcast clip went out. This is why the story says so much about how history is fought over today. Modern stars do not only play, they talk, they podcast, they shape their own image in public. Older generations did not have that same constant access to the mic. So now greatness is debated in real time by the players themselves. That can be interesting, but it can also get messy fast.
The more stars speak, the more they reveal how they see history, how they see themselves, and how badly they want control over the story. In that sense, this whole KD and LeBron moment was not just about Jordan. It was about modern players trying to speak on the record before history can speak for them. That is also why some older players react so strongly. They feel like history is being touched by men who are too close to their own image to be fully fair. They feel like the podcast era let stars argue for themselves in a way older legends never did. And when those stars start playing with painful chapters of the past while smiling through it, the old heads see disrespect, even if the speaker later says he only meant facts. The gap between generations shows up right there. One side values plain talk and context. The other side hears tone, feeling, and the weight of what was lived. Both sides think they are protecting truth. The deeper truth may be that both things can exist at once. Michael Jordan really did retire in the middle of his prime. That is a fact. LeBron really did play through year after year without stepping away. That is a fact too. Kevin Durant really is close to Jordan's scoring total because Jordan left games on the table. Another fact. But Jordan's reason for leaving matters just as much as the fact that he left. That is the balance this story never fully found. Durant leaned hard into the fact. The legends leaned hard into the pain. LeBron's laugh made the whole thing feel more like a side-taking moment than a balanced one. That is why nobody was satisfied.
And that is why, months later, the rumor of a leaked private call felt almost natural to people. It fit the emotion of the story. It fit the idea that two modern stars understood exactly what they were doing. It fit the feeling that nothing about that moment was random. Whether the call really said everything people imagined or not, the public evidence was enough to make the theory live. In the eyes of many fans, the leak only confirmed what they already believed, that the laugh was not an accident, that the timing was not random, that KD was not backing away because there was never anything to back away from. In the end, Kevin Durant did not destroy Michael Jordan's legacy. He did not replace Jordan. He didn't even claim that LeBron was above him. But he did reopen one of the most emotional wounds in basketball history, and he did it in the one setting that made it feel political. Sitting next to LeBron on LeBron's platform with LeBron laughing turned a basketball fact into a legacy fight. Then, months later, KD stood by it again, and that made the whole thing feel even less accidental. That is why this story still burns, not because anyone proved some giant plot beyond all doubt, but because the public moments were powerful enough to make people believe one existed. What Kevin Durant showed in the end is that he will not back down from saying what he believes, even if the whole basketball world tells him he should. What LeBron showed is that one laugh can change how a moment is remembered forever. And what the reaction from the legend showed is that Michael Jordan's story is still guarded with a level of emotion that no other player in the game can match. That is the real reason this story will not go away. It is not just about a comment. It is about who gets to touch Jordan's legacy, how they do it, and whether fans believe there was purpose behind the words. So now the debate stays alive for one reason more than any other. KD stood 10 toes down. He did not fold. He did not hide. He did not pretend he was joking. And because he stayed that firm, people will keep asking the same question. Was this just Kevin Durant being brutally honest about basketball history, or was it part of something bigger between him and LeBron in the endless fight over who owns the top spot in the game's greatest story? That question is why the clip still matters. That question is why the rumor still lives. And that question is why this whole story still feels unfinished.